Nicon, most all of you know him. He has done a great deal of traveling, sometimes for pleasure and sometimes for business, and has come back with quite an array of wonderful pictures. Go
I'll make
ahead.
this bigger. Okay, thanks folks for coming. This is an amazing elder hostel experience. Elder hostel, as you know, at one time wanted to add something for younger people because old folks didn't like staying in the basic dormitories, so they called it Road Scholar for younger people. But then they changed the name of elder hostel to Veritas, which I think means truth or something. Anyway, somebody already had that, so they couldn't use Veritas, so they scrapped elder hostel and went full-time to Road Scholar, which it is now. This was in April of 2000. We've been able to make several trips to Europe, specifically to our ancestors' homes in Greece. However, spending time in Central Europe was a new adventure with us. Elder Hostel, our second trip with the old folks. We were not sure why this appealed to us, but we're sure not spending time with all those 30 to 40 folks. However, we later learned that this program was almost canceled as there were only 9 people with whom we shared a marvelous experience. Present in Portugal's architecture since the Middle Ages, the making and the design of the Azulejo, a derivative of Azulaca, Arab word for shining surface, has incorporated the Moorish influences, the Italian Renaissance ornamental styles, and the exotic Oriental touches, setting the tone for a perfect melding of such varied elements and creating the most fantastic storytelling panels. We learned how to read through its colors, drawings, and historic and architectural components. Nowhere in Europe was the art of the Azulejo shown greatest development and most functional architectural utilization, with applications far beyond merely decorative functions. From the evolution of romantic, fashionable tiles lined the walls of the 15th century with polychromatic figurative message compositions, that's a lot of words, and large 17th century ceramic canvases, pictorial records of daily life, and accomplished Portuguese nobleman achievements to its current modern context of pure design, form, and dimensions. The making of the Azulejos, Portuguese glazed tiles, continues to be a pulsating art, intrinsically alive in Portuguese artistic scenario. Its current use in decorative arts is so widespread that it has become one of the more visible worldwide manifestations of the Portuguese culture. Making the tiles, the standard size of a preferred clay biscuit, 6 by 6, a mixture of tin and lead oxides, quart-rich sand, sea salt, and soda applied to form a milky whiteness to absorb the drawings. The practical aspects of the tile production and use provide several reasons for the enormous popularity of the tile in Portuguese culture. Ceramic tile is ideally suited for warm, sunny climate of Portugal because the glazed surface keeps interiors cool by reflecting sunlight, and the thick clay body provides insulation from summer heat. The porous clay of the tile body also stabilizes humidity in interiors by moderating absorption and release of moisture. As both exterior and interior building material, the glazed face offers a durable surface resistant both water and dirt. Historically, the hygienic benefit indoors would have been quite significant given the common alternatives of wooden or painted surfaces. Other characteristics, like the low cost of raw materials and production, facilitated the widespread use of tile in Portugal, a country of limited resources, as the richness of effect attained with tiles contrasts strongly with the relatively low cost of production. The practicality of tile undoubtedly has been one of the major reasons for its popularity in Portugal over the centuries. A deeper understanding of the importance of the tile to Portuguese outcomes only from the knowledge of Portugal's complex culture. So after they apply this milky whiteness to the tile, the colors of metal oxides, mostly blue, cobalt, green from copper, brown, violet, or black from manganese, yellow, antimony, and red-orange iron are applied on layouts of the adjoining tiles. As you can see in this picture, the tiles are laid out in a large section. The painting is then applied so it overlaps each tile. Our professor, our key lecturer for the entire program was Professor Jose Meco. He is a prestigious Portuguese Azulejo historian, known for his dedicated life to study the history of the tiles. In Portugal, Professor Meco has been extremely active in the area of research and promotion of topics related to the general history of Portugal art, especially as regards to Luso-Oriental arts, and particularly the Azulejo. He is an academic member of the National Academy of Fine Arts in Lisbon since his election in 1992, and either curator or member of the Cultural Council of various Portuguese museums. Anyway, I could go on and on about him. You can see here he obtained an honorific Order of Civil Merit just recently, a couple years ago. And we were blessed to have him with us on almost every leg of the trip. We started the trip in Porto. We arrived about 9 a.m., but could not check into the hotel until 1 p.m. We walked around this great little town with twisty, narrow streets, saw a lot of azulejos on our own at the Sé, the cathedral. The word Sé derives its name from the initials of Sedes et Episcopalis, which, when translated, means bishop's seat, and an adjoining cloister. The city has received an award for 2001 from UNESCO as a World Heritage Site. It's easily walkable with many tiles on even the smallest buildings and cobblestones on the streets. The buildings are narrow and tall, similar to what you see in Amsterdam. Lots of smokers, but few motor scooters, and no kiosks. It feels more like Italy to me. We stopped at a small restaurant, Pestaria, and pointed at things: a ham sandwich, pastel de carne, a meat thing, and lemon custard, leches de ovo, for dessert along with mineral water. It worked. We ate, paid, and left. So now, after a nice nap and attempting to adjust to the time, we're off to find a place for light dinner. Then maybe to sleep and get ready for tomorrow. The day took us on a tour of Porto, where 9 only, a big lunch, a few snoozes on the bus, especially for those who just arrived. We went a bit out of the old town along the Douro, the river, which runs through the city and dumps into the Atlantic. We learned why the city is called Porto and Oporto. We'll save that for later. This morning we walked again through some of the other parts of the city center, going into 2 other churches, one with azulejos on the sides of the outside building, from sidewalk to rooftop. The sidewalks and the historic preservation part of the city center are mosaics, pale yellow and background tiles with black tiles making up the design. Let's see if I'm here. We were up at 6:30 this day. We'll talk a little bit about that. Joanne described Professor Meco as a shy, disheveled teddy bear. He really knows this stuff and gets very excited. You could have seen him when he saw a poor restoration at the Sé cloister. He said, "Terrible." He had such an influence. In one place, he kicked the bishop out of his office so we could see the tiles inside of the bishop's office. This day was beautifully sunny when we left the lecture and rode our bus to the Porto wine area. We went on a tour and made a few tastes after. I still get confused about how wine is made. It's in some of the books. Lunch was in the Riviera area on the edge of the oldest of the old town. This is a UNESCO historical heritage site, as I said. We were upstairs in one of the very narrow buildings in our own eating area. 3 kinds of fish, salad, good bread, boiled batatas, and strawberries. Wine, of course. We've been eating good. After lunch, we began walking through this old town and received lectures from Professor Mecco as we strolled. The bus took us to Sao Bento railway station with a huge collection of tiles depicting the history of travel and several significant events in the history of Portugal. This is a large public display. Some of these tiles may get repetitive as you see them, but each one has such a story to tell. After, you can come up and look at some of the books and some of the things that are here. Meanwhile, Karen, can you have people pass this around?
Sure.
Just so you get an idea of the old traditional way of making tiles. This would be one of thousands put together on a building. You can pass that around. Next came the sea and the cloisters, which we had already seen. There was a wedding at the church, so we couldn't really hear the commentary very well. Once in the cloisters, Professor Mecco really turned on. Then it began raining very hard with water spurting out of a gargoyle-shaped downspouts onto the patio. We learned a lot, waiting for the weather to clear, and finally went out on the roof to see the final display of Azulejos on the wall. A few gawks at the view from the sea and back to the hotel. Tomorrow is more walking in the town, a river cruise and a picnic, and 2 more churches, iglesias. Then a bit of port wine, food, and talk. It's great. We've learned a lot at a rather slow pace. Sunday, April 9th, the last day in Porto. At the time, we didn't have smartphones with us, so we kept having to find net cafes. Fortunately, we sent emails back to our daughter, and that's where most of this information comes from. It began with me foolishly thinking the spa in the hotel would open early. Anyway, things didn't open as early as we thought. After the usual breakfast, it was on to the bus for a short drive to the center of town to begin walking. So we walked, more like a slow stroll, stopping frequently to see various uses of tiles and how Professor Mecco compared the various origins, styles, colors, and themes. Our next stop was the Deveza's factory, the old production location. This was more informational than lecture and slides we had yesterday. It was one of the fastest producers of ceramics in Portugal at the end of the 19th century. After a 2.5-hour stroll, we ended up at 2 small churches right next to each other, the Igreja dos Carmelitas and do Carmo, packed with tiles on the side, but 2 very different styles on the front and inside. Our driver met us and it was off to the boat. The boat was in the Riviera area, and we were prepared hungry for the picnic cruise. The boat was a modern, larger replica of those used to haul the casks of wine up and down the Douro. The weather turned nice and it was a pleasant trip for about an hour. This was our afternoon off, so we visited the Igreja São San Francisco. Unfortunately, this picture is a little fuzzy. What a sight. First, the catacombs where you could see real bones and skulls to the great, but the inside of the church was really amazing. More carving and gold leaf than we have ever seen. We each gave out wows, oh my gods, and similar utterances as we entered the nave. Words and pictures cannot describe the grandeur of this church. Professor Mecco is also expert in the gilded woods, the application of gold to the wooden parts of the churches. Then we caught a tram, an old one, which goes along the river to the Electric Tram Museum. Very funny as we tried to communicate with the conductor and the museum guides. Luckily, Joanne read the tram ticket so we knew how much to pay. Then the museum guides simply held up 3 fingers for a time, amount of entry, how long to wait, or whatever. Finally, a guy opened the window upstairs and waved us in. We went into the wrong door, of course, and finally went into a large barn-like structure with restored streetcars. Interesting adventure, more for the adventure than the destination. Back on the tram in an uphill, really uphill, walk to the Igreja dos Clérigos. This is also supposed to be beautiful, with a tower that is the highest point in the city. The church itself was closed, but we did the tower. 225 steps, with the last ones being in my worst dreams. We held a conversation with two young men from Washington, D.C. at the highest level and took a few pictures. When we got to the bottom, a discussion ensued as to what level we had reached. No agreement, but I do know that we went as far as one could while the others pooped out. A walk, our last one in Porto, back to the hotel with a stop for coffee and beer in the financial area, then to our favorite afternoon spot, the Net Cafe. Here we are. Tomorrow, it's off to Coimbra, and hopefully a computer we can record and tell you more. Monday, April 10th, Porto to Coimbra, 79 miles. At Coimbra, we went straight to the university, saw students in the black suits and capes with colored ribbons, signifying their area of study. Bright blue for sciences. In this case, the library is best explained with a photo. Bats inhabit the library. They eat the insects which normally would eat the books. We viewed the chapel with its tile and organ and horizontal trumpets. We walked up the steep, cobbled narrow pathways on the University Hill and found the cathedral, the monastery, Convento of São Cruz, and a side chapel with blue and white tiles. Above the church, with more tiles on the stairways and even more in the courtyard of yellow, green, and brown. We walked on our own in several side streets with a stop at the local pastry, especially lengual, a Portuguese fashion of the Greek galatoburico. That custard filling thing was wonderful. The food was great. The wine was good. Then the next photo, we're at Coimbra University in the chapel. Again, this is a little bit fuzzy, but you can see the application of the tiles throughout the whole interior. And this is the Ioannina Library in Coimbra. Again, not tiled, but certainly with all the gilded wood. Here we are at the Convento de Santa Cruz. Again, you can see the considerable application of tiles on the outside. And then we walked through the streets of Sofia and Vieira Borges streets. By the way, my Portuguese pronunciations does lack. I don't know if Stephanie's here. Stephanie is quite a Portuguese speaker, and I defer to her or others with a Portuguese tongue to help me out along the way. Tuesday, April 11th, clear and sunny but windy, depart Coimbra to Évora. Well, let's go. Here's the old university classroom, more tiles, of course. The Igreja São Francisco in Estremoz was kind of a stop. We learned from the lecture, blue tiles predominate because blue mixes better for shading and water. Blue holds its color in high firing. Blue lightens up a dull building. There is must be a large and ready supply of cobalt. And porcelains from China influenced the tile art. This trip has been much more than we expected. There's too much to remember. Hopefully a couple books, and if you want to come up and look at some of these books after, please do so. Wednesday, April 12th. By the way, this was a 16-day tour, so we're just a couple of days into it, really. The bus ride to Azulejos, the misty rain to a carpet shop, and then on to the Convento de Quinta dos Lolos. Then a bus ride to Estremoz, to the Museum Municipal, with furniture, pottery, some tile, and to Camara Municipal, a former monastery with tile and great stairways and entry halls. Then to the largest collection of panels in one place at the monastery Convento de Sao Paulo. And the police department and the public buildings. Thursday, April 13th. We're sitting at a computer in the minutes to document our day. The churches, Azulejos, and meals are all astounding and wonderful for the senses. The town of Evora, taking a few more iglesias, monasterios, and seis with large cold hallways with very few running together. Today we began the day at the Iglesia de Misericordia in Evora. This has tiles at the lower level, paintings surrounded with wonderful Baroque gilded wood above, more and more. This is supposed to be one of the best. Then we went to the university. Let's see if I'm at the right place here. A Jesuit school that began in the 1500s but later closed for many years when they were expelled by Pombal for getting too much power in Portugal. It reopened in 1974. Each classroom still has many tiles like wainscoting on each wall, and the very cold benches around the outside of the room. We were given only a short visit as a group of doctoral candidates or something like that were about to use the room. In the chapel of the university, we saw a very good example of diamond point styles from Seville from 1590. You may not know what that means, but we do now that we're becoming experts. Then we saw the monastery de Loyos, built in the late 1400s and decorated with tiles in 1714. Lots of blue things until you begin to understand the artists, painters, and others that worked on these. There is a Roman temple in the middle of Greece. While this area is old Athens, Evora, which made us think of Olympia, and so many other parts of Greece preceded it by centuries. The Moors, the Romans, the Visigoths, and all the monarchs and Catholics really began their stuff. Portuguese wealth obtained from exploration and colonization from the 1300 to 1700. It brought incredible development. That's development pronounced by a professor. Development. We will have many more stories to tell you about him. After dinner, we were treated to a youth folk dance with a group, musical backup by seniors in the hotel lobby. They invited us to dance. They even invited us to dance when they finished. All dances were couples, a nice way to end the evening. Friday, April 14th, from Evora to the Algarve in Villamora. In the Algarve, the local guide took us to Amasil to see St. Lawrence Chapel. Again, look at the amazing covering of every square inch of the interior of that building. All tiles, walls, vault, and dome. A small Moorish-style chapel tiled in the 1700s, a busy cultural center for the arts. Saturday, April 15th, very rainy. We drove to Faro and had the morning free. A quaint old capital with the Algarve with museums, shopping, and a few historical spots. We saw the Architectural Museum with a few open exhibits. Sao Pedro Church was open, but the Maritime Museum was closed. We visited the Bishop's Palace in Faro on the Algarve. Again, this is where Professor Meko kicked the bishop out so we could see everything inside. If you look at that big one on the left, you can see the magnificence of the various colors and intricacies of how they could. The artistry of these people was something beyond my imagination. We then went to the San Pedro, a very wide and Gothic, made over several times, built. At the request of Professor Meko, the bishop was kind enough to leave so we could see all the incredible yellow and blue azulejos, as I said, this one. I have to tell you a little bit about our guide, not Professor Meko, but Maria, who was the young woman who was with us all the time. She's very cosmopolitan. She was smoking and had kind of these tight clothes and looked very European. One of our travelers was from Southern California, a very proper man. when he checked into the hotel, asked for a non-smoking room, and she looked at him and said, "Just don't smoke." Anyway. We stopped at the Ponta de Padier, Point of Pity, to see the beautiful colors of the Atlantic. Rain and very windy as might be expected at this location. This is the very southern, southwestern point of Portugal, an incredible place. The Point of Mercy, the headland with a group of rock formations along the coastline of the Algarve. A side trip to Selvis with a restored castle and church. Again, if you see the inside of these, not with the tiles, but with the gilded wood. Pretty amazing. Selvis has a restored castle and church with a declining population from its day as the old capital of the Algarve. Monday, April 17th. A drive towards Lisbon with cork trees, rolling hills, rock roses, wildflowers, etc. Today we had a private tour of a private home, Quinta, or Garden de Bacalhau in Azulejos. This was our tile fixed for the day, with the manor being sold to another wealthy private citizen. Many tiles outside a summer retreat for royalty in the 1500s, now the grandson of Scoville, who bought the estate in the 1930s. We viewed tiles on the porch, garden, and pleasure house overlooking a pool. Tiles from earlier periods, geometric and motif designs. This place needs some restoration, even though it is a National Historic Site. This is the Quinta de Bacalhau, the pleasure room tiles. We're not sure what kind of pleasures went on in these places. You can get some idea from the picture. Today we made our own tiles in a small factory. It takes about 6 months to make a tile from start to finish. Painting tiles is not easy. The process is tedious and requires a bit of artistic talent. Anyway, we arrived in Lisbon in the late afternoon, April 18th. First we went to the National Tile Museum for 3 hours of slides and lectures. Lisbon, a beautiful city with hills, funiculars, trolleys, hills, much like Athens, but more artistic. Remember, Portugal went through a period of incredible wealth. Who were these famous Portuguese explorers? Bartolomeu Dias from 1450 to 1500, Vasco da Gama, 1460 to 1524, Ferdinand Magellan, 1480 to 1521, Duarte Pacheco Pereira, 1460 to 1533, Prince Henry the Navigator, Dom Henrique of Portugal, Duke of Viso, anyway, better known as Prince Henry the Navigator. Amazing when you think of these explorers. Tiles and artifacts were used as ballast on ships as they went to the new country. Raw materials were brought back, wood, gold, etc. Amazing displays of wealth in country manor houses, palaces, and cathedrals. So in Brazil, that's the main place where you would find the Portuguese language, of course, and an extensive view of tiles. So the National Tile Museum was quite an exceptional place. Just a few of the many tiles that we saw there. We passed on fado music. I don't know if you know what the fado music is. It's very slow and depressing in my opinion. It reminded me of the Greek Friday night lamentations during Holy Week, which go on and on and on and are hard to understand, and frankly we found it very depressing. We had a chance to go to a bullfight too. We passed on both. Wednesday, April 19th, Lisbon vicinity. We went to the Palacio Nacional de Queluz, the summer palace of Peter, Elizabeth, and other royalty built in the 1700s. This is the Palacio Nacional de Queluz, and again, the outside with the tiles here and there and everywhere. This garden was on and on. We got to sit in front of on the bench in front of one of the most amazing tiles I've seen. Thursday, April 20th, we went to the National Palace in Sintra. This was most interesting to me because here you see more of the original Moorish tiles. They're almost all geometric and not with as many historical or pictorial drawings as you see in some of the others. But again, it's the national tile is inside and outside. It is wonderful. Finally, the Palacio de Mequeses do Frontera was another amazing garden on the outside. Interesting, in this one you see on the right was a long panel, and there was a barber in there. There was a picture of a barber giving a shave or maybe a surgery. As you know, barbers were the first surgeons in those old days. Friday, April 21st, our last day in Lisbon. I'll just read what I said here. Hello from the Cough smoking section of the interstate internet site at the forum at Talapac in downtown Lisbon. We finished our last peak experience of the trip, the National Tile Museum in Lisbon. This trip put it all together. Bought 2 books, then followed a morning lecture of 3 hours in slides by Professor Meko. It's truly a beautiful city with the hills, funiculars, trolleys, hills, and much like Athens, but much more artistic, at least the parts we are seeing. It is clear that while Greece, AD, was very poor for many years and still is, Portugal went through a period of incredible wealth. We have seen pictures of Brazilian churches and palaces as decorated as those in Portugal. We learned much about tiles today. The professor was asked why a particular tile was Flemish in design, and Joanne said, I know, it's the orange shadows. She paid much better attention than I did. Now at 6:30 p.m. we need to find our way back to the hotel. We have a map, but asking directions is also an experience. We know fala inglés, you speak English, very well and used it often. But there's a subway system we will try another time. Besides, they were on strike this morning and may still be. Tonight after dinner, the pounds I've gained, and the wine and dessert will meet with 2 young professionals from Lisbon to discuss living in Portugal from their perspective. The Fado music outing has been canceled for some reason. We were not disappointed. And this being Holy Week and Friday official holiday, we had to squeeze a lot of stuff in tomorrow and Thursday. Some of the best collections of tiles in Lisbon are yet to be seen. The chronology and development and recipes of tiles is made clear by a museum visit today. So now we're in better perspective. Here's something different, the contemporary tiles in Lisbon and the subway. Of course, these are made much differently than the original tiles. I'm sure there's a automated process that puts the shiny surface on these. Here we are as amateur tile makers. We got our little pieces and we're able to make them. I think that's about all. And one thing that I found in the Lisbon Museum, National Museum, on the left you can see what was a panel was made. On the right is something in our apartment that was made on a contemporary basis, but with a very similar process. And that's it. Questions or comments?
And there's a lot of beautiful stuff up here.
Yeah, come up and look if you like.
Yeah, and Rita?
I have heard of American retirees moving to Portugal. Do you know anything about that?
I'm not surprised. I don't know how willing the company, the the country is to accept foreigners at this point, or whether they were inundated by refugees from other parts of the Middle East, I don't know.
Just to follow up on that, I was on a tour.
Wait
Oh, okay.
for this, please, thanks.
Yeah, I was on a tour outside of Lisbon, and our driver told us that for $500,000, you got Portuguese citizenship.
500,000.
Sounds familiar.
Well, it's cheaper than the gold card from the US. Let's see.
Just within the last couple of months, I had a friend that was thinking of moving to Portugal to retire. And they did some research and were told that they had to have an attorney and they had to check in monthly and they had to rent or buy a house at least for a year minimum. And there were a lot of restrictions on their financial ability to be there. So it wasn't easy and they did not go.
A little cultural clash from when we were in Porto about 20 years ago. We were up on the top of the hill where you have a big shopping street with no cars. And from a distance, we heard people singing, "When the Saints Go Marching In." It turns out it was harassment week for new freshmen at the university. And there was a group that was surrounded by upperclassmen.
That's
Thank
it.
you.
You don't put these